Exclusive contract from Feilu Novel Network Novel. Zongmang. Becoming a powerful figure in the shadow after accommodating thousands of worlds, Ron, who has a containment system, encountered an accident while traveling to the 10,000th world and was unable to return to his original world. He, who was forced to stay, is determined to become the master of the world that controls all beings. Regardless of any power or individual, he will fall in the process of his conquest. Qiying. Master, let's forget about not having all the people before. Tonight, let's join the 7 of us and see if you can withstand it. Altolia. My body is your sword, please use it to your heart's content. Thor. I want to leave our marks on this cloudy sky, in the wilderness, and in the deep sea. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Alice visits the door. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. King City of the Kingdom of Midgar. It was already evening, and the entire commercial district was brightly lit. Every merchant was shouting loudly, hoping to attract more customers. Suddenly, the shouting of major merchants came to a halt, and the flow of people on the street slowed down, looking sideways. Following everyone's gaze, a young woman dressed in light armor and carrying a long sword on her waist could be seen walking expressionlessly into the commercial district. The woman has long red hair and a hint of heroism between her eyebrows, but her overall face appears delicate and beautiful, making her a first-class beauty wherever she is placed. It's His Highness Alice. Someone excitedly said. It goes without saying that everyone around him knows that this woman is the first queen of the Kingdom of Midgard. Alice Midgard. For the people of Midgar, this queen is a beautiful and powerful presence, not only beautiful, but also possessing extremely high talent and expertise in swordsmanship, known as the strongest swordsman in the kingdom. At the same time, she is also serving in the Knights of the Kingdom, wholeheartedly guarding the security of the kingdom. Although she is a queen, she doesn't have much airs and is very approachable in dealing with people. Her beautiful appearance, powerful strength, and friendly temperament have made her extremely popular in the kingdom, making her the focus of attention wherever she goes. After seeing Alice, people immediately stopped and greeted her one after another. Although Alice nodded to the people around her, her face remained expressionless, without the usual friendly smile. Is Your Highness Alice unhappy? Someone whispered curiously. The person on the side immediately gave him an elbow strike and whispered, Didn't you hear about that? His Highness Alexia is missing. The person muttering with a shocked expression replied with a suppressed voice, I haven't heard of it. When did it happen? If that's the case, I can figure it out now. After all, it's Prince Alice's biological sister. It's strange to be able to laugh when she goes missing. Under the gaze of everyone, Alice walked into the Sanyu Chamber of Commerce. As soon as I entered the Sanyu Chamber of Commerce, a staff member of the Chamber of Commerce greeted me and bowed before saying, Your Highness Alice, our president is already waiting for you. Alice nodded and followed the staff to the entrance of the president's office. The staff knocked on the door and spoke at the same time, Your Excellency, Your Highness Alice is here. After a while, the door to the office opened and Gama, the president of the Sanyu Chamber of Commerce, appeared. She nodded and said hello to Alice first, and then waved to signal the staff of the Chamber of Commerce to leave first. After the staff left, Gama looked at Alice and made way, gesturing inside the office with his hand and speaking, Your Highness, please come in. Alice walked into the president's office and saw a young man standing by the window, looking out at the night. After the door closed, Alice saw the man turn around and face herself. At the moment when Alice met the man's gaze, she felt that his pitch-black eyes were like an endless abyss, deep, silent, and mysterious. Then Alice also saw the man's appearance clearly and suddenly felt a daze. She is not someone who has never seen the world before. On the contrary, due to her status as the first queen, she has participated in various diplomatic occasions since childhood, and has seen anyone of her kind. But it was the first time she had seen such a handsome man in front of her. "Your Highness Alice, please allow me to introduce you." Gamma's voice pulled Alice's thoughts back to reality. "This is the leader of the Shadow Garden you are looking for, Lord Shadow." While Gamma was speaking, Ron walked up to Alice and reached out his hand. "Hello, I am Shadow." Alice shook Ron's hand and spoke, "Hello, I'm Alice." After greeting, Alice immediately said, "Shadow Leader, I'm looking for you this time for my sister's business. She has been missing for 3 days, and we have searched every corner of the royal city but have not found any trace of her. If you have any information about her, I am willing to offer a high price to purchase." Ron picked up an envelope from the nearby table and handed it to Alice. "Your Highness Alice is straightforward, so I won't talk much. After all, the earlier you save Your Highness Alexia, the better. There is an address inside this envelope, and His Highness Alexia is currently there." Alice looked at the envelope in Ron's hand and didn't immediately go to pick it up. She asked, "Thank you for the Shadow Leader's willingness to provide information. I wonder how much this information costs." Ron smiled for a moment. "No money. If Her Royal Highness Alice is willing, it can be seen as the beginning of our friendship." Alice fell silent for a moment and continued to ask, "Is there no other way?" To be honest, Alice doesn't want to have too much connection with the Shadow or the Shadow Garden behind him. If it weren't for the urgency of this situation and the inability to find Alexia, she would never have stepped into this door. As the first princess of the Kingdom of Midgard and hailed as the strongest swordsman in the kingdom, she has always aspired to become the Queen Shield of the kingdom and has a lot of pride in her heart. Although in her eyes, the shadow of the underground forces who had controlled 3 kingdoms within 3 years of debut was considered a figure, from her perspective, no matter how large the underground forces were, they could not be compared to the kingdoms under the sunshine. She is very confident that if one day in the future, Shadow Garden stands opposite to the kingdom, and she leads the kingdom knights to launch an attack, she will definitely be able to destroy Shadow Garden in a short period of time. The reason for being polite now is simply because the other party has not yet openly provoked oneself. Facing Alice's question, Ron restrained his smile, put the envelope back on the table, and turned his back. "Since Her Highness Alice is unwilling to make friends with me, there is no need for me to help you. Please go back." Alice didn't expect the other party's attitude to be so resolute, not even giving any room for negotiation, and she suddenly felt a little annoyed in her heart. However, the most important thing in front of her is to rescue her sister. If she delays for an extra second, Horatia will be in even more danger. Seeing that there was only one way to go, Alice didn't hesitate and immediately reached out her hand to Ron. "In that case, Shadow Leader, I hope our friendship will last forever." Ron turned around, shook Alice's hand, and his face softened. "Friendship endures forever. Wishing you all the best." Alice thanked her and picked up the envelope before walking out of the president's office. Chapter 2. Alpha's Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Alice left, Ron sat on the sofa and turned his head to look at the side door of the room. "Alpha, come over here for a moment." The door opened in response, and Alpha appeared from the doorway. He walked up to Ron and whispered, "Master." Ron spoke up, "Later, go to the vicinity where Alexia is imprisoned. If Alice's life is in danger, save her. If she wants to see me again, just bring her here." Alpha understood, then jumped down from the window and disappeared into the vast night. After Alpha left, Gamma immediately sat in Ron's arms, swaying gently while slightly complaining, "Master, you haven't come to my place for several months. You must stay a few more days this time before leaving, to relieve the pain of my longing." Ron gently patted Gamma. "Don't worry, I will stay a few more days this time. There are 2 more things that you need to arrange next." Gamma's expression became serious. "Please give orders, Master." Ron asked, "Has Alice and Alexia ever bought clothes from you before?" Gamma nodded. "I've bought it a few times." Ron continued, "The first thing is to prepare several sets of clothes according to their sizes, both inside and outside. Then prepare the bathroom and hot water. Gamma's eyes showed a hint of curiosity and surprise. Master, it seems that you are not familiar with them, are you? Can we have sex so soon? Ron pinched Gamma's happy bean. Where did you think? Just do as I say. Gamma snorted lightly and asked, Master, what is the second thing? Ron replied, the second thing is to prepare some disaster relief supplies, mainly tents, blankets, ready-to-eat food, purified water, and anti-inflammatory and hemostatic drugs. The more, the better. Gamma responded and immediately went out to find someone to arrange. On the other hand, after leaving the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, Alpha rushed towards the place where Alexia was imprisoned and finally stopped on the rooftop of a nearby high-rise building, watching the surrounding dynamics. Not long after, Alpha saw Alice disguised as an ordinary person, appearing with several members of the Knights who had also disguised themselves, and quickly running towards the target location. When they arrived near the target location, before taking any action, suddenly a roar echoed through the earth, followed by a huge humanoid monster several meters high appearing from the target location. The monster is brown all over, with a detestable face and sharp hands and feet. Once it appears, it immediately begins to destroy surrounding buildings and indiscriminately attacks areas with people. The sudden appearance of the monster immediately caused panic among people, and they all began to flee. Seeing the monster appear, Alice's heart tightened and she immediately suspected that the shadow had set up a plot to harm her. However, looking at the monsters that were destroying buildings and killing civilians, Alice couldn't think too much. She could only think about eliminating the monsters first. I'll stop the monster, you guys are responsible for evacuating the crowd. Alice spoke to the knights beside her, then pulled off the robe that covered her face and raised her sword, shouting at the surrounding civilians, I am Alice, the first queen. Please don't panic and follow the guidance of the members of the knights to leave here. When the people around saw Alice, a glimmer of hope immediately appeared in their eyes. The panic subsided a bit and they began to slowly follow the guidance of the members of the knights and leave. Alice jumped with the help of the surrounding buildings and quickly approached the monster, then condensed her magic and injected it into her sword, looking at the monster's arm that had just been lifted up. Ah! Alice's sword instantly severed the monster's arm, and after the severed arm fell to the ground, the surrounding people cheered. We have help. It's truly Lord Alice, who cut off the monster's arm in an instant. I knew that with Lord Alice around, we would definitely be fine. But Alice, who had been staring at the monster all along, did not have any joy because she saw that the wound on the opponent's arm was regenerating at an extremely fast speed. In just a few seconds, a brand new arm was regenerated. What kind of monster is this? Alice was secretly frightened, but she couldn't back down. She immediately charged up with her sword and gritted her teeth, saying, what if you can regenerate? I'll kill you once if you regenerate, and I'll kill you 10,000 times if you regenerate. The monster was also drawn to Alice's sword just now, roaring and raising its palm to pat her. After a few rounds, Alice chopped off several arms of the monster again, but it didn't have much impact on it. Each wound healed at an extremely fast speed before launching a new attack. What the hell is this? Alice looked at the still lively monster in front of her and couldn't help but curse. As time passed, Alice's physical exertion grew stronger and stronger, but the monster looked as if nothing had happened after being cut off several times, which made her increasingly frustrated and eager to find a way to crack it. But what can I do? Alice looked at the monster that her hands were taking turns shooting at her, feeling anxious and frustrated inside. My attack is basically ineffective against her and cannot cause fatal injuries. And as the stamina decreases, just dealing with its attack requires concentrating most of the attention. What should I do now? What exactly is the origin of this monster? Why haven't I heard any news about it before? Ron's face came to Alice's mind, and she thought to herself, if this is a conspiracy of your shadow garden, I will definitely eliminate all of you. Because there were too many thoughts in her mind, Alice was momentarily distracted and didn't notice that the monster's sharp fingertips were about to poke her. The screams of the onlookers still pulled Alice's thoughts back, but it was already too late. Alice looked at the monster's fingertips, knowing that she couldn't avoid it no matter what, even if she had no time to raise her hand and wave her sword. Am I going to die here? Alice was extremely unwilling in her heart. She had not yet rescued her sister, nor had she investigated the origin of this monster, let alone protected the people of the royal city. Sorry. Alexia. Alice slowly closed her eyes, tears streaming down from the corners of her eyes. Sorry, father. I'm sorry. The people of our country. Alice suddenly felt that time was passing slowly, as if it had been a long time. The expected pain had not arrived, but instead the cheers of the people echoed in her ears. She opened her eyes and saw a beautiful blonde girl wearing a black combat uniform standing in front of her. In front of the young girl, there is a deep pit that cannot be seen at a glance. And the unbridled monster just now is gone. Chapter 3. Visiting Home Again. You are listening at novel full.audio. After a brief moment of unconsciousness, Alice looked around at the excited onlookers and roughly understood what had happened. It should be the girl in front of her who defeated the monster and saved herself. Alice looked at the girl again and asked, the battle suit of Shadow Garden, the elf with golden long hair, are you the chief of the 7 shadows of Shadow Garden, Alpha? Alpha turned his head to look at Alice, with no visible emotion on his face. Lord Shadow is worried that you may have an accident, so he specifically asked me to protect you in the dark. Upon hearing this, Alice understood in her heart that whether it was a layout or not, she owed the Shadow another favor. Thank you, Shadow Leader. After I finish handling it, I will personally go and thank him. Alice finished speaking and immediately ran to the address given to her by Ron. The target address is not far from her current location, just a few steps away. Alice looked at the ordinary-looking 2-story building in front of her, raised her trembling hand, and pushed open the door. Excuse me, is anyone there? Alice scanned and asked as she spoke. No one responded. There are no people in the room either. Alice also anticipated this, as the letter stated that Alexia was in the basement of this building. Seeing no one in the room, Alice began to search for the entrance to the basement. After finding the entrance, Alice jumped down without hesitation and saw a room decorated like a clinic. There is also an operating bed in this room, with some blood stains on the sheets. There is a pair of shoes by the surgical bed. Alice recognized Alexia's shoes at a glance and her heart raced. Her gaze scanned every corner of the room, trying to guess what had happened here. Alexia. Alice murmured softly, her eyes also beginning to moisten. Then she saw an unclosed entrance to a secret passage, immediately drilled in, and saw a passage built on the basis of an underground drainage system. But at this point, the passage had been destroyed, and in front of her were only twisted and disorderly pipes and stones. Alice's heart sank to the bottom of the valley in an instant, and the newly risen hope vanished into thin air. She looked around in confusion, and Ron's face reappeared in her mind. The fact proves that the address given to me by Shadow is correct. Alice thought to herself, since they can know that Aricia is here, they should also know where they went earlier, right? I'll go find the Shadow again. Alice suddenly felt a bit manipulated. Although she didn't want to have any interaction with that man, she owed him 2 big favors in less than half a day and was about to owe a third one. I must rescue my sister. Alice gritted her teeth and made up her mind before leaving the building. As soon as Alice walked out of the door, she saw Alpha standing not far away, so she walked straight to him and said, "Excuse me, can you take me to find the Shadow Leader?" Alpha nodded and then took Alice to the Sanua Chamber of Commerce. When Alice arrived at the Sanua Chamber of Commerce a few hours ago, she was still shining brightly, but now she is disheveled and disheveled. The significant changes before and after also caught the attention of passers-by and chamber staff. Alice ignored their gaze and followed Alpha into the president's office. As soon as she entered the president's office, Alice saw Alexia sitting on the sofa eating. Alexia. Alice found it difficult to believe the scene before her. For a few moments, she thought she was going to completely lose this sister. Alexia was also stunned when she saw Alice, who was all disheveled. She didn't know what the other person had experienced, but seeing the other person's tearful eyes and happy and worried expressions, these were not important anymore. Alexia immediately put down her chopsticks and got up to rush over and hug Alice. The two hugged each other and wept. After holding each other for a while, Alice calmed down and looked at Ron with incredulous eyes, asking, "Shadow Leader, what is the situation?" Ron showed a warm smile. "We are now friends, and when friends need help, I naturally cannot shirk my duty." Alice nodded, knowing that the debt she owed today could not be paid off in a short while or simply. Alice wiped away her tears and looked at Ron, speaking seriously, "Shadow Leader, if you need any help in the future, just let me know." Ron replied, "Your Highness Alice, don't worry, I won't be polite when needed." Alice laughed and reached out her hand to Ron, cool and fast. Ron shook Alice's hand and then gestured to Gamma with his eyes. Gamma immediately walked up to Alice and spoke, "Your Highness Alice, I have prepared a bathroom and hot water for you, as well as a few sets of clothes to choose from. If you don't mind, you can go take a shower and change clothes first." As soon as she entered the door and saw Alexia, Alice guessed that the Sanua Chamber of Commerce was prepared in this regard, but she didn't expect it to be prepared for herself. She nodded and thanked Gamma, then followed him to the bathroom. After bathing and changing clothes, Alice returned to the president's office and thanked Ron again before saying, "Shadow Leader, thank you for your help today. I will remember this kindness in my heart. But now I need to accompany Alexia back to the palace. Father and his family are very worried these days, and I want to take her back as soon as possible to report her safety. If you need me anywhere, you can always send someone to find me. I assure you that as long as it does not endanger the security of the kingdom, harm the interests of the kingdom, or harm my family and people, I will help you." Ron replied, "The most urgent thing at the moment is to take His Highness Alexia back to ensure safety. As for my side, it's not urgent yet. You just need to handle the urgent matters at hand first. The carriage I prepared for you is parked at the door. The groom is skilled, and if you encounter any trouble, you can hand it over to him." Alice nodded and thanked Ron with Alexia, then walked out of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce and got into the arranged carriage. As soon as the carriage started driving, Alice looked at Alexia and couldn't wait to ask, "Who kidnapped you?" Chapter 4. Gamma Preparation. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Alexia's eyes were filled with anger when she heard Alice's words, "It's that shameless little man from Gino. He kidnapped me and imprisoned me there. There were his spies in both the Swordsman Academy and the Knights Order of the Royal City, so he was able to hide from the heavens and avoid the repeated searches of the king's sister." Upon hearing Janet's name, Alice suddenly felt a bit overwhelmed and asked hesitantly, "But Geno is your betrothal partner, and he has also done an excellent teaching job at the Swordsman Academy." Alexia let out a disdainful cold snort. "It's because he usually looks like a gentleman that so many people think he's a good person. Your Highness, Geno has already betrayed Midgar. His purpose in kidnapping me this time is to summon some demon god with my blood, which is the huge monster you will see later. From his communication with his accomplices, it can be inferred that his purpose in doing so is to enter the 12 Round Table Knights of certain religious orders." Sister Wang, do you know which cult Geno is referring to? Alice fell silent for a moment before speaking up. "It should be the diocesan order. But I also know very little about this because this organization is too mysterious and there is very little information flowing out." Alice's gaze showed a hint of curiosity and she asked, "After the monster appeared, were you transferred by Geno, and then the people from Shadow Garden saved you?" Alexia nodded. "There is a secret passage in the room where I was imprisoned, I don't know where it leads. Upon learning that Sister Wang had brought someone to find me, Geno immediately wanted to take me and leave through a secret passage. But shortly after entering, I met the Shadow Leader, who saved me. Alice's eyes were even more curious. Shadow Leader. How exactly did he save you? Alexia spoke slowly, her eyes filled with longing that penetrated deep into her soul. A sword. The Shadow Leader killed Gino with just one sword. He went from raising his hand to killing Gino. The whole process can be said to be simple and unadorned, looking like an ordinary person who doesn't know how to use a sword. He picked up his sword and casually chopped it. Alexia excitedly grabbed Alice's hand, no longer hiding her excitement. Sister Wang, do you know that when I saw the Shadow Leader slaying Gino with a sword, I felt like I was even more determined on my own path. There has always been a huge gap between you and me in swordsmanship. Although we are sisters, you have shown great talent in swordsmanship since you were a child, and you have grown rapidly. Soon you will be known as the strongest swordsman in the kingdom. Sister Wang's swordsmanship is powerful and magnificent. Even if I put in all my efforts, I cannot reach your level. So I wanted to take a completely opposite path and see if even after reaching the ultimate level of basic swordsmanship, I could unleash a powerful force. Before this, I had been exploring this path, but there has been no progress. Alexia's grip on Alice's hand increased her strength and her tone became more cheerful, but today, I saw that even ordinary swordsmanship can unleash tremendous power. As long as I go far enough, I believe I will not be lower in achievement than Sister Wang. I also want to become someone like my queen who can protect the kingdom. I don't want to rely on others' strength when facing danger. I want to become stronger. I think the next time I encounter this situation, I will be able to solve it on my own. Alice did not expect that Alexia's thoughts had changed and she had gained a lot of confidence after witnessing the swordsmanship of the shadows. But she is happy to see this kind of change. Alice patted her sister's hand and softly said, I'm glad you have confidence in your own path, and I also hope you can go further until you surpass me. However, swordsmanship cannot be improved by words. Do you have any other ideas? Alexia immediately nodded, of course. I have decided to apprentice to the Shadow Leader and invite him to teach me swordsmanship. I know, there is no conflict between Midgard and Shadow Garden, and from what happened just now, it seems that you have a connection with them, sister. So I think you would agree, right? Alice looked at Alexia with hopeful eyes and let out a slight sigh in her heart. Alas, my younger sister, I don't call myself having a relationship with someone else. It's just that I owe someone a favor on my own. Today, the Shadow Leader has already helped me 3 great things and saved each of our lives. I don't know when this favor will be repaid, but now you want to find someone else to learn from. Alice felt a bit worried in her heart, but she didn't want to ruin her sister's mood either. She planned to talk about it in a few days, so she smiled silently and just nodded. Alexia saw Alice's reaction and thought she agreed, cheering happily. After the carriage arrived at the entrance of the palace, it stopped. Alice and Alexia got off the carriage, thanked the groom, and then walked into the palace together. At this time, in the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, Gamma was leading Ron and Alpha towards the Chamber of Secrets. The secret chamber of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce is located at the top of the entire building, which was built by Gamma at great cost. The interior decoration is magnificent and filled with rare treasures from all over the mainland. This secret room is also specifically reserved for Ron. The secret room is divided into 5 parts. The main hall, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. On the way to the Chamber of Secrets, Gamma looked at Ron and asked, Master, the disaster relief supplies you just asked me to prepare have already been loaded onto 2 vehicles. Do you want to pull them to the designated area first? Ron shook his head, don't worry, let people continue to prepare. Midgar is a kingdom, and in such a situation, the royal family should first go to disaster relief and not steal their attention. Gamma continued to ask, when would be more appropriate for us to deliver it? Ron replied, tomorrow, the royal family of Midgar should send a notice to the major chambers of commerce, asking them to develop a reconstruction plan for the disaster-stricken area and then proceed with bidding. After receiving the notification, please confirm whether the royal family's disaster relief personnel have arrived at the disaster area. If they have already arrived, then use the pre-reconstruction plan as a pretext to send this batch of materials to the disaster area. At the same time, personnel were arranged to wear the uniforms of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce to assist the royal family's disaster relief personnel. Gamma's eyes lit up. I understand, Master. In this way, we can not only gain the favor of the royal family, but also expand our influence among the public, which can be said to be the best advertisement. Ron nodded and threw a question. Gamma, what do you think the current Midgar royal family is most concerned about besides resettling disaster victims and rebuilding disaster areas? Gamma immediately replied, public opinion image. Firstly, the second queen of the kingdom disappeared inexplicably for a long time, and secondly, an inexplicable monster suddenly appeared in the royal city, causing a large number of buildings to be destroyed and a large number of people to die. Alice, known as the strongest swordsman in the kingdom, was unable to stop it and had to rely on the power of the Shadow Garden to deal with the monster. The combination of these 2 points will undoubtedly make Midgar a laughing stock on the mainland, with a sharp decline in image and a predominantly negative public opinion. So they will definitely do something to restore their image. I don't know anything else, but the reconstruction of this disaster area will definitely be one of the points. Ron nodded and gestured for Gamma to continue speaking. Gamma continued, so I feel that this disaster area reconstruction plan should focus on this aspect as the main focus, and new landmark buildings can be created during the reconstruction process to demonstrate the country's strength. Ron patted Gamma's shoulder. Your thinking is fine, just do a good job in the details. I still have a lot of confidence in you. Gamma was instantly happy. Thank you very much for the host's recognition. This is all good for your daily teaching. After the three entered the secret room, Gamma took Ron and Alpha straight to the restaurant. After the two of them sat down, Gamma whispered softly in Ron's ear, Master, tonight's welcome banquet was specially prepared for you. I hope you have a happy meal. After speaking, Gamma left the restaurant. Alpha glanced at the direction in which Gamma was leaving, turned his head to look at Ron, and spoke, Master, Gamma should have prepared a good dinner for you, but you still need to go there in person. Ron nodded, also curious about what today's dinner would be like. Before long, the shadow guard who was in charge of the fight began to serve food, and also introduced which was dim sum, which was dessert, which was the first dish, and so on, but the main course has not been seen yet. After Ron and Alpha finished their dishes, it was a while before 4 shadow guards pushed a huge metal cart in. This cart is covered with red silk fabric. Judging from its shape, the red fabric covers a square container. Lord Shadow and Lord Alpha, the main course for tonight has arrived. After pushing the cart between Ron and Alpha, the shadow guards bowed to each of them before leaving. And when I left, I also closed the restaurant door. Chapter 5. Please enjoy your main course. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. After the Shadow Guardians left, Ron looked at the mysterious cart in front of him and had a basic answer in his heart. He raised his hand and lifted the red cloth, revealing a transparent glass cabinet in front of him. Inside the cabinet was a sofa, on which Gamma, dressed boldly, lay on his side, holding a glass of red wine in his hand. This picture is quite designed, and Ron can tell at a glance that it must have been carefully prepared. Gamma stared straight at Ron, and as his interest grew stronger in his eyes, he slowly pressed the glass in his hand against his chin, while lifting his head and tilting it slowly. Red wine flows out slowly along the curve of the Gamma neck due to the tilt of the glass. Gamma pressed another button beside her, and the glass cabinet immediately descended, retracting the interior of the cart. Then she whispered to Ron, Master, your main course for tonight has arrived. Please enjoy it to your heart's content. Faced with this situation, Ron felt that hesitating for a second was a betrayal of Gamma, and immediately did what he needed to do. Alpha on the side was also shocked by Gamma's operation, and she felt like she had gained another wave of knowledge today. However, with a sigh in his heart, Alpha did not hesitate and immediately fought alongside Gamma. A few hours later, Gamma was defeated and looked at the two people still fighting, saying, Alpha's physique is really impressive, he can resist his master for so long. I have to get up early every day to manage the business of the Chamber of Commerce. I'll go wash up and sleep first, so you two can communicate slowly. Gamma was about to get up and leave when Ron grabbed him. Today's matter started and ended with you. Gamma shouted for help, but there was no trace of fear on his face. The next morning, Ron walked into the office of the president of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce and saw Gamma sitting behind his desk writing something. Upon seeing Ron enter, Gamma put down his pen and stood up to greet him. Master, you're awake. Do you need to arrange breakfast? Ron signaled not to use it and then sat down on the sofa, asked the shadow guard in the Swordsman Academy to send a message to Laz, asking her to come out after school this afternoon. I will wait for her at the entrance of the academy. Gamma understood and immediately gave orders. Then Gamma returned to the office, sat next to Ron, poured a cup of tea and placed it in front of him. Master, as you expected, the Midgard royal family sent a bidding notice for the reconstruction plan early this morning. After receiving the notification, I personally led someone to bring the supplies over. Although other chambers of commerce have similar ideas, they haven't set off yet because they haven't prepared in advance. Alice is in charge of disaster relief, and she personally led the team to rescue the disaster area. After seeing us, Alice immediately gave orders to the officials nearby, prohibiting people from other chambers of commerce from assisting in disaster relief. They could donate materials, but could not send people to the affected area. Only people from the Sanyu Chamber of Commerce were allowed to assist in disaster relief. And it is required that the officials responsible for procurement can only contact the Sanua Chamber of Commerce to purchase disaster relief materials. Ron smiled for a moment. This Alice is going to make the Sanua Chamber of Commerce stand out in the forest. And it can also be said that he sold a person's affection to the Sanua Chamber of Commerce. Gamma nodded, I think the same way. In this way, the reputation of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce will be established, but it will also inevitably become a hostile target for other chambers of commerce. Ordinary people may think that the Sanua Chamber of Commerce has the support of the Midgard royal family, but in reality, the Midgard royal family is not an insurmountable presence for several chambers of commerce with power spanning across the continent. Ron picked up his teacup and took a sip, see the trick and break the trick. But we also need to be prepared. The staff of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce are all held by Show, and I am not very worried about this. However, the suppliers of the Chamber of Commerce come from a variety of sources, and the procurement channels must increase their inspection efforts to ensure that the quality of each product is not a problem. The Sanua Chamber of Commerce also needs to start stocking up its branches in other countries to meet unexpected needs. Major processing plants also need to deploy additional guards. Gamma took a notebook and jotted down every point Ron said. After explaining, Ron said, You ask the Shadow Guard of the Swordsman Academy to tell Laz that I'm here in Midgard. I'll be waiting for her at the entrance of the academy at noon after school. Gamma responded and then went out to arrange. After a while, Gamma returned to the office and sat next to Ron again. Master, has Beta reported her updates to you? Ron nodded. A few days ago, I told you that based on the date, you should be able to reach Midgard today, right? Gamma nodded, with a hint of cunning in his eyes. Master, I specially prepared a gift for her this time. The clothes were designed by me personally, they are very provocative and can perfectly highlight her greatest strengths. Ron smiled and said, Let me look forward to it first. Gamma stood up and sat down at his desk, confidently saying, It will definitely be beyond the master's control. At noon, Ron left the Sanua Chamber of Commerce and arrived at the entrance of the Swordsman Academy. This time period is exactly after school, but students from the Swordsman Academy usually settle in the cafeteria at noon, so there aren't many people at the entrance of the academy now. Ron had just stopped at the entrance of the college when a figure rushed out of the college at an extremely fast speed and came straight towards him. Ron saw clearly the appearance of the newcomer, who was Princess Laz of the Kingdom of Oriana. After rushing towards Ron, Laws didn't stop her steps. She bumped into the latter's arms and hugged him tightly, while saying with a slight choking voice, "Benefactor, you finally came to find me. The new book sets sail, and we hope that all the experts can support us with free flowers. Thank you very much." Chapter 6. I Have This Impulse. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Because there were not many people at the entrance of the college at this moment, only the eyes of the two guards at the entrance followed Laws. When they saw Laws fly into Ron's arms, their eyes widened. After all, what was in front of them was the princess of the country of art, Oriana. The person who could excite her so much was still a man, which was definitely big news. However, due to distance issues, the guards couldn't see who the man was, so they wanted to get closer. However, before they could get closer, Ron left with Laws. The two of them arrived at a cafe near the college and found a private room to sit down. This coffee shop belongs to Shadow Garden, and the staff inside are all Shadow Guardians. After the two of them sat down, Laws looked at Ron and said, "My benefactor, since I first met you 7 or 8 years ago, your appearance has been like this. After all these years, you have still been so handsome." Ron smiled and didn't answer. 7 or 8 years ago, when Ron first traveled to this world, he met the kidnapped Laws and took action to save him. I have seen it several times since then. But since Ron formed Shadow Garden 3 years ago, he has never seen it again. Ron traveled to this world to complete a mission of containment, to contain an ancient artifact from this world. He obtained a containment system in his original world, which could accommodate task targets in his own containment space, and each time he completed a task, he would receive a generous reward. His mission goal sometimes requires traveling to other worlds. For example, this time his goal is to collect an ancient artifact from the current world. The task was completed smoothly, and after Ron completed it, he was originally planning to return to his original world to receive rewards as before. But he encountered a spatial distortion that caused the return channel to fail, leaving him only able to stay in the current world. However, due to misfortune, Ron gained control over all the contents of the containment space and was free to use the abilities, weapons, props, and other items previously housed, such as the protection of the undead bird, the 10-fist sword, and the broken jade. The first thing Ron left behind was to determine the timeline of this world. He first came to the Carcino family and saw that the only daughter of the Carcino family, Clea Carcino, was already 7 or 8 years old, but the Carcino couple did not have a second child yet. Until now, Clea is already 17 years old, and the Cagino couple still do not have a second child. Subsequently, he relied on his memory to wander between the continents, rescuing all the 7 shadows led by Alpha and taking them under his command, while also cultivating his future foundation. A few years have passed. 3 years ago, when the time was ripe, Ron established the Shadow Garden with the basic idea of crushing the conspiracy of the Diabolos cult and saving innocent people. He began to expand his power from various aspects such as armed forces, intelligence, and commerce. Then, in less than 3 years, the Shadow Garden was transformed into a massive underground organization, firmly controlling the underground forces of the 3 kingdoms. Although they are underground forces, these 3 kingdoms are mostly controlled by Shadow Garden in front and behind the scenes, so Ron is the actual ruler of these 3 kingdoms. And Ron's current location in the kingdom of Midgar is his 4th goal. Ron looked at Laws and started a topic. Although we haven't seen each other for a few years, I have some understanding about your situation. I heard you're doing pretty well with Midgar. Laws smiled and replied, "I have been at the Magic Swordsman Academy in Midgard for over 2 years, and I have indeed had a decent time. I have been advancing on the path of swordsmanship, and no one can defeat me in the current Swordsman Academy. At the upcoming swordsmanship conference in the college, I will once again prove this. But that's not enough, because my goal is you. I want to catch up with your footsteps and become a powerhouse on this continent." Ron looked at Laws and asked, "Do you really have the confidence to defeat all your opponents at the swordsmanship competition?" Law's eyes flickered for a moment, but her face was full of affirmation. I can definitely do it. Ron continued to ask, what if you have an attack at a swordsmanship convention? There was a hint of panic in Law's eyes, but her expression was still trying to maintain normalcy. Benefactor, what do you mean by seizure? Ron slowly uttered two words, curse. Upon hearing the word curse, Laws was taken aback for a moment, then slowly lowered her head, tears streaming down her face as she murmured, Benefactor, as expected, nothing can be hidden from your eyes. There is indeed a curse hidden within me. I am a cursed and polluted dirty person. People like me don't deserve to talk about pursuits and ideals. Ron covered Rose's mouth with his hand and interrupted her conversation. Curse is not a proof of evil or filth, it is just a virus-like thing created by the Diopolis cult. Being planted with this virus is not because of your poor character, but because of your high martial arts talent and being a woman. Laws looked at Ron with some suspicion, but anticipation began to bloom deep in her pupils. Ron wiped away Rose's tears and said, I came to you this time to purify the curse within your body and solve your worries. Laws stood up excitedly, grabbed Ron's hand, and looked at him with hope. Really? Can you really purify the curse inside me? Ron nodded and said seriously, of course, but it may take some time. Okay, after school every night, I'll pick you up at my residence at the entrance of the college. Rhodes immediately nodded vigorously, then wrapped around the table and hugged Ron, crying, thank you. You saved my life again, I really don't know how to repay you. Ron gently stroked Rose's back and comforted her, didn't I mention it before? We are friends, and friends just need to help each other. Laws raised her small face and looked at Ron, saying, but what can I help you with? Your strength is so strong that if you can't even solve a problem, I probably won't be of any use. Ron nodded on Law's lips and smiled, if I don't need any help all along, doesn't that mean I'm doing well? What you need to consider now is to first purify the curse in your body, and then prove yourself at the swordsmanship tournament. The swordsmanship conference is also related to one thing, you should know, right? Laws nodded, I know that the first place winner in the swordsmanship competition can represent the Swordsman Academy and directly participate in the Martial God Festival held by the Midgard royal family in the second half of the year. At the Martial God Festival, there will be strong players from all over the mainland, as well as various forces from the mainland, coming to watch the competition. My father will also come over. In previous years, my strength was not enough. This year, I am already invincible in the Magic Sword Academy, so I also want to go to the Martial God Festival to meet experts from other countries on the mainland. At the same time, I also want to prove in front of my father that my choice is the right one. My way is a sword. Ron gestured for Laws to sit down and said, the Martial God Festival is indeed a place to prove oneself. However, with your current strength, there is still some room for improvement in order to make a name for yourself at the Martial God Festival. Laws quickly asked, is there any way for me to significantly improve my strength in a short period of time? Ron replied, if you're willing, I can guide you in swordsmanship. Laws naturally couldn't help but beg for it, so she immediately agreed and continued to ask, when can we start? Do I still need to ask for leave from the Swordsman Academy? Ron replied, no need. Just use the weekend time. I will purify the curse in your body for the next 2 days. Laws nodded and looked at Ron with tears in her eyes, my benefactor, I really don't know how to thank you anymore. Ron smiled, 7 or 8 years have passed, and you can see me as a benefactor and keep it in your heart. That alone is enough. Laws wiped away her tears, then quickly got up and leaned in front of Ron, pouting her lips to skim on the other person's face. After returning to her seat, Laws lowered her head and didn't dare to look across from her. She blushed and whispered, I'm sorry, please forgive my intrusion. But I have such an impulse in my heart. Ron smiled for a moment, it's okay, let's order first. Although the other party kissed him, it was not a complete signal, and it was not yet at the stage of in-depth communication, so Ron did not go any further. Chapter 7 Alice, who is somewhat confused. You are listening at novel full.audio. After the two finished their meal, Ron sent Laz back to the academy and then headed to the area that was destroyed by the monster yesterday. At this time, there were still many refugees in the vicinity of the disaster-stricken area who needed to be arranged. Ron saw many people wearing the uniforms of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, as well as those wearing Royal Disaster Relief uniforms, moving supplies to help the victims. People from other chambers of commerce are nowhere to be seen. Judging from the situation, it is indeed as Gamma said. In the busy crowd, Ron saw Alice personally carrying supplies and delivering relief supplies to the disaster victims, with someone beside her specifically writing something. Through the group of disaster victims, Ron also heard many praises from the victims, including Alice and the Sanua Chamber of Commerce. As if sensing something, Alice turned her head to take a look. After seeing Ron, her smile became even more lively and she nodded as a gesture. Then Alice turned around and explained a few words to the people around her, then walked towards Ron. Good afternoon. Alice walked up to Ron and reached out to greet him. There are many people here with mixed eyes, so I won't address you. Ron shook Alice's hand. Your Highness, Alice has a heart. Thanks to your blessings, the popularity and revenue of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce in the royal city can be said to be even higher. Alice smiled and said, we are friends, it's appropriate to help a little, it's not worth mentioning. Ron didn't answer, his gaze scanned the disaster area in front of him, and finally returned to Alice's face. Judging from the current situation, there is probably still a lot of work to be done. If your Highness Alice needs any help, feel free to speak up. Alice maintained a smile on her face. Thank you for taking the trouble. The following are all complicated small matters that we can solve ourselves. Ron nodded, that's good. I heard that your country will hold the Martial God Festival in the second half of the year. At that time, experts from all over the mainland will come to participate, and the royal families and nobles from various countries on the mainland will also come to watch the competition. Before that, the reconstruction work in the disaster area should be able to be completed smoothly, right? Alice stared at Ron, her smile gradually narrowing. After a moment of silence, her smile reappeared. We have decided to entrust the reconstruction work in the disaster area to the Sanua Chamber of Commerce. I am very confident in the ability of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, and I am also planning to make the rebuilt disaster area a key tourist destination for foreign guests during the second half of the year's Martial God Festival. You should also have great confidence in the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, right? Ron smiled and said, that's natural. After all, I personally brought out the president of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce, and I feel very confident about her. The Sanua Chamber of Commerce will definitely be able to successfully complete the reconstruction plan. After all, this Chamber of Commerce has never been at a loss. Alice's smile froze for a moment, but she continued to hold on. Let's wait and see. I hope the Sanua Chamber of Commerce is really as powerful as you said. Ron confidently said, that's for sure. After all, we are friends. How could I disappoint my friend's expectations? Alice was filled with resentment in her heart, and she naturally knew that Ron was mocking her, but she had no choice because she knew it was her own fault for not being kind, and the other person's attitude was also expected. To blame, one can only blame oneself for being too weak. Alice thought to herself, if I could not rely on shadows and not owe such a large debt of gratitude, I wouldn't need to worry so much now. Stronger, but how can I become stronger? Alice suddenly felt a bit confused. She has always been known as a peerless genius. At a young age, she defeated many domestic experts and was praised as the #1 swordsman in the kingdom. But in yesterday's sudden crisis, I was helpless in the face of that monster, and there was even a risk of being killed. It's such a powerful monster, but it was easily defeated by Alpha under the Shadow's command. Although everyone knows that this subordinate is the only one with the power and strength of Shadow Garden, she has not exerted all her strength, and her true strength is still unknown. This made Alice even more fearful, and at the same time, she began to be wary of the shadows and the Shadow Garden. Last night Alice stayed up all night, thinking about how she could balance this sudden intrusion into the shadow garden that she couldn't drive out. With Midgar's own strength, there is probably no hope. To balance it, one must rely on other forces, whether it's driving tigers and swallowing wolves or watching tigers fight on the mountain. It's better than having a dominant family. Alice calmed her thoughts for a moment, looked at Ron, and gestured behind her with her hand. If you have nothing else to do, I won't accompany you. There are still many things to be busy with here. Ron made a "please go" gesture. No problem, you can go ahead and get busy, don't worry about me. Alice nodded and then left. As soon as she stepped out of Ron's sight, she immediately called in several members of the Knights and asked them to keep a close eye on each other, recording every move. After Alice left, Ron took a casual turn around and then used teleportation skills at a corner. His figure disappeared instantly, and the next second he appeared in a corner of the Midgard Academy of Sciences. Several members of the Knights who were originally secretly monitoring him saw Ron suddenly disappear and dared not conceal it. They immediately went to report to Alice. Alice was also mentally prepared for this. If these few people could keep an eye on Ron, it would only make her feel strange. So after several members of the Knights were involved in disaster relief, the matter was not brought up again. Speaking of Ron. After Ron arrived at the Midgard Academy, he walked towards the library. The library of the Midgard Academy is the largest library in the entire country, with countless books in its collection. Academic colleges and libraries are usually open to the public, so pedestrians in the college don't mind seeing Ron, who is not wearing an academic college uniform. After entering the library, Ron scanned around and then saw a girl with pink short hair in a corner. The girl has a beautiful face and a pure temperament. She is holding a thick book and carefully reading it. There is also a notebook filled with notes in her hand. Shirley Barnett. Ron looked at the girl with the title of Midgar's First Mind and walked straight towards her. Chapter 8. Shirley Barnett. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ron walked over to Shirley, glanced at the information and notebook she was researching, and then spoke up. I didn't expect that there are still people doing research on this ancient relic now. Upon hearing Ron's words, Shirley immediately turned her head to look at him and asked with curiosity, Sir, can you see what I am researching? Ron nodded and sat down, with a look of nostalgia in his eyes. I have studied this ancient relic with someone before. Upon hearing this, Shirley immediately became interested and revealed a problem she was currently facing. Ron didn't hesitate at all and directly explained the principle and solution to this problem. As Shirley suddenly realized, her eyes were also filled with surprise. This question has troubled her for a long time, and she has consulted many scholars specializing in the study of ancient artifacts, but there has been no progress. I didn't expect Ron, who is so young in front of her, to be able to answer it with his mouth open, and he even spoke very detailed and transparent. This is clearly a scholar with a wealth of knowledge. Shirley looked at Ron curiously and asked, I haven't seen you before, nor have I heard of such a young and knowledgeable scholar in Midgar. Are you from another country? Upon hearing Shirley's words, Ron's nostalgia became increasingly evident in his eyes. After looking around, he let out a gentle sigh. Actually, I have also conducted research on this land before, and I often come to this library before. But there were some accidents later on, so I left this country and went global. Recently, when I passed by here, I was thinking of revisiting my old place and coming here to see. I didn't expect to meet you, which can be considered a kind of fate. Shirley felt a sense of sadness and vicissitudes as Ron spoke, as if she had experienced many misfortunes. However, she is not interested in the story about Ron at the moment. What interests her more is the knowledge in the other person's mind. Shirley didn't answer, but continued to ask questions, and Ron answered them one by one. Shirley became more and more excited as she asked. She had never felt like there was a day before that could allow her to receive such a vast amount of knowledge and information in a short period of time like today. She felt like a dry sponge being thrown into the sea, with no other thoughts except for frantic suction. Time passes unnoticed, and the sun gradually tilts westward. After the sun had completely set, Ron looked up at the sky and then turned his head to interrupt Shirley's questioning. "All right, I'm leaving now." Upon hearing Ron's words, the light in Shirley's eyes instantly dimmed a bit, and she opened her mouth, hesitating to speak. Ron looked at Shirley with a polite smile and asked, "May I ask if there is anything else?" Shirley paused for a moment and asked, "May I ask if you will come back here again? I want to learn more knowledge from you." Ron replied, "If you want to see me again, then don't mention today's events to anyone. Remember, it's anyone. I don't want to apologize to my late friend." Shirley immediately nodded vigorously. "Don't worry, I won't mention today's matter to anyone." Ron nodded and got up to leave the library. Shirley watched Ron's back as she watched, and when the other person's figure came out of her sight, she suddenly reacted, "Did I forget to say thank you to him just now? They kindly explained to me all afternoon, but when we parted ways, I didn't even say thank you." Shirley suddenly felt so foolish that she didn't even realize this basic courtesy. She quickly ran out of the library and chased in the direction Ron had just left, but could no longer find anyone. Shirley looked at the increasingly dark sky and thought to herself, feeling guilty, "I was so stupid that I didn't realize it. If you can still see him, make sure to thank him well first." Then Shirley returned to the library, tidied up her books and notes, and returned to her residence. Opening the door, Shirley saw her adoptive father, Barnett, sitting at the table in the living room reading a newspaper, with 4 dishes, 1 soup, and 2 bowls of rice in front of her, seemingly untouched. Upon hearing the sound of the door opening, looked up and upon seeing Shirley, a bright smile immediately appeared on her face. "Shirley is back. The food is ready and will wait for you to come back." Shirley nodded silently, put down all the books in her arms, washed her hands, walked to the table, sat down, picked up chopsticks, and started eating. Noticed Shirley's abnormality and asked softly, "Is Shirley unhappy today? If you encounter any problems, you can tell me." Shirley took a few bites of the rice and chewed it vigorously, while her eyes gradually became moist. After a while, she put down the bowl in her hand and spoke, "Father, am I really stupid?" didn't know why Shirley suddenly came out like this, so she immediately comforted her. "How could Shirley be stupid? You are a talented woman known as the top brain of the kingdom." Shirley wiped the corner of her eye and said with guilt, "But today someone helped me, but I didn't say thank you to them." Upon hearing these words, couldn't help but laugh. "Is Shirley feeling guilty about this?" Shirley looked at and nodded. Smiled and said, "Don't worry so much about this matter. If you forget to say thank you today, you can bring some gifts to the other person tomorrow and express your gratitude to them. Since someone else has helped you, it means they must be a warm-hearted person and won't have any objections to you because of this kind of thing. If I saw you even bringing a gift to thank you, I would probably be even happier." Shirley lowered her head and remembered what Ron had said before leaving, murmuring, "But I don't know when I'll meet him." said, "Then you can buy a small gift and carry it with you. When will you meet him again and make up for your gratitude?" Shirley thought for a moment and felt that there was only one solution left, so she nodded and continued eating. "Thank you for the 100-point reward from the boss of the castle stir-fry. Thank you, Poison Mud Boss, for your 100 points reward and 1 reminder card." Chapter 9. Starting Purification. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. After leaving the academic library, Ron arrived at the entrance of the Swordsman Academy and saw that Laz was already waiting at the door, looking around. After seeing Ron, Laz immediately ran up to him with a smile on her face and anticipation in her eyes. "Benefactor, you're here." Ron nodded and looked around at the sparse students, apologizing slightly, "Sorry, I have something to do this afternoon and I'm late." "Have you been waiting for a long time?" Laz shook her head. "No, as long as you come, I'm willing to wait for as long as possible." Ron smiled for a moment. "Do you have anything you want to eat? I'll treat you to dinner as compensation for my late arrival." Laws thought for a moment and said, then let's go to the Sanya Chamber of Commerce. Although it's a Chamber of Commerce, their Chamber of Commerce building has a whole floor full of various delicacies, many of which I haven't heard of before, and many of them are very delicious. Ron naturally had no objections and took Laws to the Sanya Chamber of Commerce. Along the way, the two of them attracted a lot of attention, partly because their handsome men and beautiful women were very pleasing to the eye, and partly because many people knew Law's identity and were curious to see her walking so intimately with the opposite sex on the street. After all, I had never heard of a close relationship between Laws and any opposite sex before. After arriving at the Sanya Chamber of Commerce, Laws took Ron to eat and stroll, constantly introducing him to everything he knew. Ron didn't disturb her interest either, and listened attentively to her story. For Ron, this is also collecting feedback from customers. After eating and drinking enough, Laws looked at Ron, my benefactor, when can we start? Although Laws enjoys eating and strolling with Ron, she still remembers the most important things. Ron replied, we can start any time. I didn't disturb you just now because I saw you so happy. Laws smiled somewhat embarrassed and said, my benefactor, I really rarely have the opportunity to relax like this. I don't know why, but in front of my benefactor, I naturally forgot about my identities. This feeling is really comfortable. If only I really didn't have those identities, I guess I could be as free and unrestrained every day as I am today. Ron replied, ordinary people also have their own troubles. Having more will naturally make one feel burdened. Laws nodded, I know, benefactor. Sometimes it's inevitable to fantasize about a life that you can't experience. Ron patted Law's shoulder, okay, come with me. Then, Ron took Laws to the secret room of the Sanya Chamber of Commerce. As soon as Laws entered the door, she was amazed by the luxury of the secret room. After looking around, she said, my benefactor, this place is a bit too luxurious. Some of the things placed inside may not be able to be taken out by the royal family of Oriana. After sighing for a moment, Laws looked at Ron and asked, benefactor, are you preparing to purify the curse inside my body here? Ron declared, before purification begins, I need to explain to you that the purification curse requires my palm to touch your skin. If you mind, we won't start for now. Laws didn't hesitate at all, it's okay, benefactor, let's start. Ron nodded, where do your curses usually show symptoms? Laws tapped her shoulder blade with her finger, usually it starts from this side. Ron lifted his palm, and purple-black magic began to appear in the palm. These magic had solidified into substance and slowly flowed in the palm. I need to place my palm on the area where you have symptoms, and then use magic to gradually purify the curse. Laws found it difficult to understand the magic that condensed into substance. She had never seen anyone who could condense the magic into substance before, only heard that the top experts on the continent could do it. After being stunned for a moment, Laws immediately let out her shoulder blade and leaned in front of Ron, benefactor, let's start. Ron pressed his palm on Law's shoulder blade, and magic began to enter, enveloping the seed of the curse. With Ron's current abilities, he can instantly purify the curse in Law's body, but he doesn't plan on completing it so easily. As magic entered her body, Laws felt a warm sensation in her shoulder blades, and the original pain gradually subsided. Laws looked at Ron with a serious expression in front of her, and a sense of emotion began to surge in her heart. Her eyes began to moisten. However, in order to avoid affecting the other party, she tried to restrain her emotions and waited for the end of this purification. After a while, Ron withdrew his palm and spoke with a serious expression, Laws, perhaps due to your high talent in swordsmanship and bloodline reasons, the curse seed in your body is more deeply eroding than that of ordinary people. But you don't have to worry, the curse can definitely be completely purified, but the treatment time may be longer, which may take a few days. Rhodes immediately grabbed Ron's hand, my benefactor, I have been waiting for several years and don't care if I wait a few more days. It's you've helped me time and time again, but I don't have anything to repay you. I really feel guilty. Ron touched the girl's head and comforted her, people always have to grow slowly, don't worry, there's no telling which day in the future you can help me. Laz nodded and saw her exposed shoulders, her pretty face turning red. She immediately pulled on her clothes. Just now, because she was focused on purifying the curse, she didn't think much. Now that the purification is over, Laz immediately feels a strong sense of shyness coming from the bottom of her heart. She has been constrained by extremely strict royal etiquette since childhood, even her father was only relatively intimate during her early years. As she grew up, there was gradually less contact between father and daughter. Fathers are like this, and other members of the opposite sex do not have physical contact. In a situation like today, it was the first time that Laz had encountered it. Looking back at the scene just now, all she could feel was a strong sense of shyness. Benefactor. Laz lowered her head, her face flushed, and her little hands tightly grasped her collar, wanting to say something, but she didn't know what to say. Ron patted Laz's shoulder and then got up and walked towards the door. You can tidy up first, I'll wait for you at the door. After a while, Laz sorted out her clothes and mood, walked out of the secret room, came to Ron, and then bowed slightly to him. Thank you, benefactor. My life was saved by you repeatedly. I won't say much more polite words. In the future, wherever there is a need, we will be willing to do whatever it takes. Ron didn't answer and raised his hand to signal ahead. Let's go, I'll take you back. Laz smiled and waved her hand. Please stay, benefactor. I'll go back by myself, so I won't trouble you. Ron nodded and watched as Laz left. Chapter 10. Eating and drinking enough before talking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After watching Laz leave, Ron pushed open the door to the president's office of the Sanua Chamber of Commerce and saw that Beta had arrived, sitting across from Gamma, holding a notebook and carefully recording something. When Ron pushed open the door, Gamma looked up and then stood up to say hello, Master, you're back. Upon hearing Gamma's words, Beta immediately turned her head to look. When she saw Ron, she jumped up from the sofa and rushed up to hug him. Master, I finally see you. Ron smiled and hugged Beta with his back hand. Long time no see, Beta. Beta buried her head in Ron's arms and said in a slightly coquettish tone, Master, the months without you have been unbearable. As Beta spoke, her little hand also began to move. Master, these past few months have been holding me back. Can you let me eat and drink enough before we talk? Upon seeing this, Gamma immediately closed the curtains and turned his head to look at Beta. I knew you would be eager to see your master. Not at all reserved. Be gentle and don't hit your master with your teeth. Beta's mouth was busy and he didn't have time to fight back, he just gave Gamma a blank glance. After eating and drinking enough, Beta collapsed weakly on the sofa, her eyes blurred, but there was a satisfied smile on the corner of her mouth. Master, it's true that we still need a few people together. I can't bear it alone. Gamma clicked twice. You impatient little fairy, I even prepared a gift for you, but before it came in handy, you had already exhausted yourself. Beta closed her eyes and said slowly, let's talk about it tomorrow, let's talk about it tomorrow. Gamma looked helplessly at Ron. Master, the hot water is ready for you. You can go take a shower first. Ron nodded, opened a side door, and walked into the bathroom. After taking a shower, Gamma poured a cup of tea and placed it on the table. Master, this afternoon we received news that Alice is preparing to send envoys to neighboring countries, seeking cooperation and attempting to secure opportunities for visits and exchanges to other countries. Ron nodded. Yesterday's incident should have caused her a considerable sense of crisis. The resettlement and reconstruction of disaster victims in the disaster area have been basically arranged, and the next step is to consider how to enhance our own and the country's strength. Gamma thought for a moment and said, based on Midgar's current situation, in order to enhance his strength, he can only rely on external forces. After all, Midgar is a kingdom dominated by humans, and its military strength is inherently weaker than that of a country or power dominated by elves and orcs. But on this continent, military force is the most important. If there is insufficient military force, other aspects will be easily constrained. Yesterday, what Gino and his team summoned was just an incomplete version of the demon god's body, with strength that is unknown how many levels weaker it will be. Moreover, Gino and his team are not considered core members of the cult, and the resources they can mobilize are even rarer. If a stronger opponent appears next time, it will be another disaster for Midgar. The countries around Midgar are mostly human kingdoms, and some countries' military strength is even inferior to Midgar's. If a bigger disaster strikes next time, nearby countries may also be powerless. Ron took over the conversation. Alice must be aware of this. What she really wants to look for is not military support from neighboring countries, but support from information channels. After all, every country has its own intelligence system and information channels, and Midgar's military might is considered good in the human kingdom, but the intelligence system is not outstanding. In addition, with the betrayal of the originally capable General Gino and the liquidation of a group of related members of the Knights Order and the Swordsman Academy, Midgar's manpower was scarce at this time, and the intelligence system would definitely not be able to recover in the short term. If we could use the information channels of neighboring countries to learn about ways to enhance our own strength, Alice's idea would be considered successful. Gamma is clear, I am truly the master, and I can tell at a glance what Alice wants to do. Later, Gamma became somewhat puzzled, but master, whether it's military force or intelligence, why doesn't she choose to cooperate with us? In terms of strength, the nearby kingdoms cannot compare with us at all, can they? Ron replied, Alice doesn't want us to have too much say in Midgar. If she only cooperates with us and always comes to us for help every time she encounters something, she will inevitably rely more and more on us in all aspects until it is impossible to separate or resist. At that time, Midgar's actual controller will become us. This is definitely not the result that Alice wants to see. She is an ambitious person and also very proud, naturally unwilling to become a puppet manipulated by others. Gamma agreed, yes, master. I'm just worried about this. After all, if other powerful forces participate, the cost of controlling Midgar will increase and the profit ratio will decrease. Also, if Alice wants to play the game of driving tigers and swallowing wolves, in a three-party game, the weakest Midgar will inevitably be the most dangerous. If Midgard is destroyed, it will also increase our costs. Should we take advantage of the current instability within Midgard and the absence of third-party intervention to make a strong move first? Ron shook his head, no need. The so-called 30.6 strategies prioritize attacking the heart. Simple military conquest is not the result I want. The deaths and accidents that occur during the process of military conquest can also lead to the siege of other forces on the mainland. What we need to do is to become the shadow behind the kingdom, the actual speaker. For Alice. I want to tear apart her proud coat bit by bit, letting her know that pride without strength will only bring humiliation. The first queen of a kingdom, struggling desperately in an increasingly murky environment, is also quite interesting. Let's enjoy it for a while first.